I'm sure everyone wants to disappear. Please do come in, have a seat for the final session so we can hopefully get started and finish on time and go home and enjoy the evening. Yep, if I can ask everyone to come and get seated as soon as possible so that I can start this spot, which I know at the end of a very, very long day on a Saturday is going to be the most popular spot of the day. Who does not want at 3:25 on a Saturday to start looking at global context, eh? Aren't we the lucky ones? So, please, like I say, do have a seat as soon as you can so we can get started. And just while the last people, like I say, I'm here for the last session as well. The song there was Never Can Say Goodbye, because you probably thought that about me, because here I am again at the end of the day. And like I say, whilst you're just getting settled and thinking, why on earth global context at this time of day? We want our students to be
Melissa,
eco-warriors.
Wales need your help.
I love whales!
Like this.
Oh, Melissa!
Real eco-warriors.
I freaking love whales!
Like Melissa McCarthy.
Hey, Melissa, now the trees need you. The ice caps are in trouble. Hey, Melissa, now the rhinos need saving.
Rhinos!
It's hard to be an eco-warrior, but it's easy to drive like one. Introducing the most fuel-efficient crossover, the Kia Niro.
Oh, come on!
So, hands up those of you who don't want your students to be like Melissa McCarthy there in that Kia advert, okay? So, to kick us off for this afternoon and the global context, and I'm going to finish up with a little bit as well from this morning. It all fits together anyway, because I'm sure everybody knows we did the key concepts, the related concepts this morning, and the third piece that goes into the statement of inquiry are the global context, okay? So, what about the global context? There they are, all 6 of them, all looking rather big. And I'm just going to start off by looking at how to choose a global context exploration, putting it in the unit planner, coming up with a statement of inquiry, and then looking a bit at what to do with it, okay? And hopefully it will have some interest. Like I say, I know it's been a very, very long day, but let's see what we can do. The NYP contexts, you may notice something about them. They're all something and something else, or pretty much all something and something else. And the somethings, identities, relationships, culture, globalization, sustainability, fairness, development, they're all concepts again, okay? So when we're actually putting a global context into our statement of inquiry, we're actually putting another concept in there, okay? So we're dealing with concepts and they're big. So we need to keep things small. And this is why I say, well, one key concept, we can only use one. But I would go for one related concept, because you know what? You're likely to be dealing with yet another concept when you start choosing something from these. So here are 6. What do we do with them? Okay, here's my Shakespeare Why All the Fuss unit that I showed you this morning. And communication, audience and style is in there. Oh, global context. Right, got to put a global context in now. What should that global context be? I know, orientation in space and time sounds good to me. Okay, there it is. Yippee, I can forget all about that now. We've done that bit, the IB. I can go and do my proper teaching now. Get my kids to do some proper learning, all right? That's not what we need to do, sadly. Okay? And this particular page, or 2 or 3 pages, is in Principles into Practice. Rather stupidly, I think. I'm not from the IB directly, so I can say these things. Because this information is actually what we need for our unit planner and our planning and our teaching and learning, and it should be in the subject guides, quite frankly, but it isn't. It's in Principles into Practice, which is why a lot of teachers, when I come across them, have no idea this exists, and therefore that's what they're doing. And then you've got this huge global context, and the question is, what on earth do you do with it then? And of course, people end up doing nothing with it. So, what should be done? We need to go to this, all right? And when you're doing the personal project as well, I'm not going to have time to fit that in now, but of course the students for the personal project also have to look at a global context, and it's the explorations, or it can be details from the descriptors, but it's some detail from here, because the global context title is massive. 2 whole key concepts in most of them. Okay, they can't possibly, and we can't possibly address all that. So we need this, and we've got to pick individual details from here that fit. And I will tell you now that when I'm unit planning, I look at this before I bother with this. I don't actually choose a global context. I choose an exploration, okay, detail from here or from here. And then the global context is whatever that falls under, okay? Because this is actually what I need to address with my students. And you can see there it's pretty useful because it narrows it down to some of the things that we might be interested in, that might fit with what we're doing, that might be something else that represents good learning for the kids in terms of them being able to look at what they're learning in the classroom and then taking that and applying it to real life, which is what the global contexts are actually all about. So, if you don't know about Principles into Practice, run to your coordinators immediately and demand to know where those pages are, and that's what's used for the global context box in the unit planner. And like I say, there are 2 things to look at. Again, for me, I think the IB will be reviewing this and doing it a little bit differently later on, because basically there's stuff in here that can be useful and there's stuff in here that can be useful, and I'm quite happy to use bits out of either, all right? They are suggestions, they're not the only things that we can look at either. We've got here the descriptor, okay? Students will explore the interconnected of human-made systems and communities, the relationship, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so we've got the descriptor there with lots of interesting and useful details, okay? And we need to remember with the global context, we've got that, okay? But we've also got focus question there, descriptor here, okay? And apart from that, we've also got then the explorations here as well. And even those, you might notice, some of these have got a number of things: markets, commodities, commercialization. We don't even need to choose an entire one, an entire bullet point. We can choose bits of the bullet point, okay? What is it our kids need to look at? That's the question to ask. What can they look at? How can they apply their learning to some kind of real life context, okay? What would fit with them doing that? And if you look down these explorations, you'll find some good ideas. Conflict is a good one. Conflict resolution, for example, comes up, okay? So if your subject involves that, like history or language and literature or whatever, you can always pick out conflict and look at conflict resolution at their level in the classroom. How do they sort things out, okay? And that, of course, is bringing in ATL skills. So like I say, this is what we need to use. And again, you can see there, particular explorations are also part of our global context. So number one, note what we're supposed to use with that, and it's in principles into practice, not in the subject guides, where it really should be, I have to say, with a bit more guidance as well on how to use it. All right? But it's not there, sadly, yet. I think it will be later. So that was our third bit, and we know, I think, this is Shakespeare. Excuse me, my throat's going a bit. This is Shakespeare from this morning again, and that was our conceptual understanding. Effective communication depends on adapting aspects of style to the audience. We talked a bit about that. I think you probably all remember that. But we also now have to add to that a global context. And when I was kind of thinking about effective communication, the bit that I came up with out of the global context explorations, it's actually from the descriptor for this one, relationships between and the interconnectedness of individuals from local perspectives, because I was thinking about the relationships between us when we communicate and the audience, okay? And I was looking with them, with the students, at how they connect with an audience, and that's something which you can quite easily show. I can quite easily show examples of. I can show Martin Luther King in that great speech. I can show Freddie Mercury at Wembley, getting all the audience. You know, real examples of how communicators really connect with an audience and looking at how they make that connection with an audience. So that's what I actually came up with. The wording is the IBs, but, you know, the idea is fine. And with that, we do get the statement of inquiry. So you can see there, conceptual understanding here. And then effective communication depends on connecting with and relating to the particular audience. And they are going to be presenting to a primary school audience or an audience of primary school students. So what do they need to do? That's the question. And that bit of the statement of inquiry allows us to look at that question. How are you going to make a connection with your audience in order to communicate effectively? Who are your audience? Yeah, what kinds of stylistic things? So you can see how it all comes together now as they think about that real life context of actually communicating effectively with the audience that's going to be in front of them. Okay? So that's that being taken into a real life context. But we also look, I have to say, at how Shakespeare connected with his audience, because he actually, of course, was writing for a particular theatre, and there was an awful lot of rowdiness in that theatre, and he had to get attention and so on and so on. So we look at that as well. He's another one that could connect really well with an audience, and therefore we look at that as well, his connection with his audience. Okay? And that's how the global context comes in, and it's not, like I say, a huge thing. It doesn't need to be a huge thing. But this is what it's basically aimed at, really. The global context is aimed at us as teachers taking things out of the classroom, or getting the kids to take it out of the classroom and see where it fits in real life. Yeah, see how we can actually use it in real life, or they can use it in real life. And that is the main thought to think about, basically, when you're looking at global context. Okay, this is what I'm going to do in the classroom with the kids, but how can I get them to think about how they can take this from here and go and use it in their real lives? Where is it relevant? Where is it going to be relevant to them in the lives that they're in the world around them? Okay, that's the basic question. And answering that will allow you to use the global context, because that's what it's about, okay? It's not about wordsmithing and all the rest of it. It's about, okay, kids doing this in the class, how can they go use this, and how can they recognize where they can go use this somewhere else in their lives? All right? So, that's how it works with the global context. And you might remember, like I say, it's worth thinking about that question and even possibly writing an answer to it, because this is part of the summative assessment that the students actually do. So that's one way in which they're putting that particular global context learning into action in a real life context. All right? So, kind of a quick look at that. Let me just show you something else, because, okay, we've got our statement of inquiry now, and how do we actually then, how do we introduce it to the kids? And I'm kind of going to move on a little bit now to inquiry as well, but you might kind of wonder, like I say, it's great all on paper on the unit planner, but what do we do with the kids? Do we stand there and explain global context to them? So let me just give you a quick example of, it's another Shakespeare. I'm using Shakespeare because I know everybody knows it. And I might walk into a classroom and show kids this particular scene, okay? This is a different unit, by the way.
You come hither, my lord, to marry this lady.
No. To be married to her. You come to marry her.
Lady, you come hither to be married to this count.
I do.
If either of you have any inward impediment why you should not be conjoined, I charge you, on your souls, to utter it.
Know you any, hero?
None, my lord.
Know you any, count?
I dare make his answer. None.
Stand thee by, friar. Father, by your leave, will you with free and unconstrained soul give me this maid, your daughter?
As freely, son, as God did give her me.
And what have I to give you back, whose worth may counterpoise this rich and precious gift?
Nothing, unless you render her again.
Sweet prince, you learn me noble thankfulness.
There's enough. Take her back again.
Give not this rotten orange to your friend. She's but the sign and semblance of her honor. Behold how like a maid she blushes here. Would you not swear, or you can see her, that she were a maid by these exterior shows, but she is none. She knows the heat of a luxurious bed.
What do you mean, my lord?
Not to be married. Not to knit my soul to an approved wanton.
No!
Dear my lord, if you in your own proof have vanquished the resistance of her youth and made defeat of her virginity...
No, Leonato! I never tempted her with word too large. But, as a brother to his sister, showed bashful sincerity and comely love.
And seemed I ever otherwise to you?
You seem to me as Diane in her orb, but you are more intemperate in your blood than Venus. Or those pampered animals that rage in savage sensuality.
Is my lord well that you don't speak so wise?
Sweet prince, why speak not you?
What should I speak? I stand dishonored that I've gone about to link my dear friend to a common stead.
No! What man was he talked with you yesternight, out at your window betwixt 12 and 1?
I talked with no man at that hour, my lord!
Why, then you are no maiden. Leonato, I'm sorry you must hear. Upon mine honor, myself, my brother, and this grieved count did see her, hear her, at that hour last night, talk with a ruffian at her chamber window, who hath indeed, most like a liberal villain, confessed the vile encounters they have had 1,000 times in secret.
I'm not got to
Come, let us go.
These things come thus to light, smother her spirits up.
Cousin, I won't take you down!
Hath no man's dagger here a point for me? Do not live, hero! Do not open thine eyes! Grieved I had but one. Why had I one? Why ever wast thou lovely in my eyes?
Okay, so there's Dad smacking his daughter across the face, and it wasn't quite the wedding she was really expecting. You probably gathered that. Okay, so if I teach this particular play, which is Much Ado About Nothing, by the way, I might show that to the kids just like that. And it was interesting because, you know, here we are at the end of a long day, but I got the feeling most of you were watching that with quite a bit of interest, okay? And the kids do the same thing. And why are they looking at it with a great deal of interest? Okay, they might recognize Denzel, you know, is that really Denzel Washington in Shakespeare, Mom? Or whatever. But actually, they're looking at it because they see things of interest there. It's very dramatic, yeah. But there are other things of interest in there as well. And if we were looking at applying this to real life, what might they be looking at and thinking about in terms of their own lives? This is MYP5 students, and you can probably see how rich it is. What we actually do with this play, and like I say, this is what I show them first, but this unit is actually based on relationships and what makes a healthy relationships. And these are MYP5 grade 10 students who are really at a point where they need to be thinking about healthy relationships and the kinds of relationships they have, you know, dating relationships quite clearly, and also getting together with people and with their parents as well, okay? And this is the way into that. So I might do various things. I kind of ask them to look at that. I might ask them to write down a response. I might ask them to write what led up to this, okay? There are all kinds of things that can be done there, all kinds of ways that this can be stimulus material for them then to start thinking of things that apply to their own lives. And like I say, this particular unit is on that. And once they've seen this, they're interested, actually. Much Ado About Nothing, Shakespeare, is relevant to them, and it does indeed show an awful lot of interesting stuff that can prompt conversations on that topic of healthy relationships, okay? So it's a unit, like I say, that can, but generally is pretty well received. It is, you might not think it from that, but it's actually a comedy, that play, and those two end up getting married, which is a happy ending, and part of what the students can look at is, you know, would you really go and marry him after he did that? He made a huge mistake, did Claudio. So, what is the global context then for this particular unit? And you can see on the slide here, the bit in red that I picked out. This is identities and relationships, human relationships, including families and friends, okay? Because that's what we're going to do. We're going to put that play or apply it to a real life context by looking at the relationships in the play and considering what healthy and unhealthy relationships actually are, okay? And that then can go into the global context bit there, human relationships including families and friends. Context influences how people connect with each other. This is also a play about a very particular context with various ways of going about things, okay? It's got its own traditions, and of course, every context does. So we can look at how context influences that, and then we can add our global context there. Context can influence the ways in which people connect with each other and the nature of the relationships they form, okay? So how do people get together with others? How do they make friends? There's friendships in there as well. There's family relationships. And there are, of course, relationships that lead to marriage as well, okay? So lots of rich stuff there for the kids to look at and think about in terms of their own lives, all right? So I hope that gives some idea about how you can kind of go in through the global context into a unit And like I say, if you've got good stimulus material, that can really work. Another thing, if you kind of think, what can I do with the global context? This is quite useful. It's from the Programme Standards and Practices, okay? And one of the things we have to do, because these, of course, are requirements for IB schools, is this. The written curriculum promotes students' awareness of individual, local, national, and world issues. And it's easy then it might be useful to use this then and think about whatever it is you're looking at. What happens on an individual level? What happens locally? Okay, especially if we've got students from different cultures, because the answers are going to be different. What happens nationally and what happens globally? Okay, and it's worth looking into that. And in terms, for example, of expectations that surround things like family relationships or dating and things, okay? What does it look like on the different levels? How similar or different is it for each student in the class, and so on? Okay? Like I say, excuse my voice, because it's kind of going at the end of today. So, just an idea there, and don't be afraid to think about the global context as well as the way in. If it's the thing that's going to grab the kids, then start with that, all right? So that's just one idea there. And that kind of brings us, because we've now got our statement of inquiry. I've talked a little bit about how to move in. And what I was describing there in some of the things that I can do with the students, get them to watch that and then get them to brainstorm and blah, blah, blah. I was actually beginning to look at inquiry-based learning, okay? And I'd like just to show you a video. Well, I'm going to show you 3, actually, quite short videos. This one explains, I think, really clearly what inquiry-based learning actually is. And then I'm going to show you some very short clips from a film which show it in action, or show inquiry-based and non-inquiry-based learning in action. So, what is inquiry-based learning? By the way, these are all on YouTube, so you can always find these videos and use them at school as well. Look at a bit of
There is an old saying, tell me and I forget. Show me and I may remember. Involve me and I will understand. The last part of this statement is the essence of inquiry-based learning. Students, rather than learning passively from the teacher and memorizing facts, construct their own understanding and knowledge. The concept of inquiry-based learning is something that all of us experience throughout our lives. Growing up, children are continually asking questions in an attempt to make sense of the world. We all want to understand the world around us, or try to figure out how it works, and we do this by asking questions. For example, how are engines able to make cars move? Or why is the sky always grey in Ireland? It is our natural urge to inquire, and during this process we are continually thinking in order to make meaning. Essentially, inquiry-based learning starts with a question. Many of us have grown up learning through traditional methods. In this approach, teachers act as the sage on the stage, passing on information from a textbook to the students in a step-by-step process. Success is then measured in the student's ability to recite this information with a focus on reproducing one correct answer. Inquiry-based learning is more dynamic than this, as it actively involves students in their own learning. Inquiry-based learning stems from John Dewey's constructivist theory that people construct their own understanding and knowledge of the world through experiencing things and then reflecting on those experiences. Constructivists believe that children learn best when they ask questions, investigate solutions, create new knowledge as they gather information, discuss their discoveries and experiences, and reflect on new knowledge. In other words, students' learning is not based on teacher-directed activities that stress recall, but rather they are learning the skills to synthesize, interpret, and evaluate information. In an inquiry teaching approach, the teacher acts as a facilitator of the student's learning, rather than the provider of information. As well as having an excellent understanding of the content, the teacher also needs to carefully plan their learning units. This planning will involve the teacher either developing an open-ended question or devising a topic based on the curriculum for the students to determine their own questions. It will also involve designing exploration-type activities that activates prior knowledge and engages the students. Typically, the lesson will start with an open-ended question devised by the teacher, the students, or sometimes both. Through the use of carefully planned activities, the teacher will then encourage students to discuss the question and search for their own answers. It is during this process where students gather resources, do their own research, and synthesize the information. They then present and share their findings. Finally, the students will then need to be given the opportunity to reflect on their learning. Through this process, students are building their own knowledge. Naturally, every class is different, and the approach of the teacher will vary according to the ability of the class and the topic. Teachers are able to utilize different levels of inquiry, from a structured approach to an open inquiry. There are essentially 3 levels of inquiry: structured, guided, and open. A structured approach is where the teacher mainly directs the inquiry. The teacher provides a question to be investigated, and they would then provide step-by-step instructions that will help enable the students to discover the answers. These kinds of inquiries are important because they enable students to gradually develop their abilities to conduct more open-ended inquiries. It is also a good level to start for teachers who are new to inquiry-based learning. With guided inquiry, the teacher generally chooses the questions, but the students would take more responsibility for establishing the direction and methods of their inquiry. The teacher plays an important role in guiding the inquiry. This could be through feedback or posing further questions that help lead the students in the right direction. In an open inquiry, the students take the lead in establishing the question and methods while the teacher takes on a supportive role. Having students ask the questions that guide their own investigations is the key to open inquiry and requires higher order thinking. It is also possible to use a combination of 2 types of inquiry, and this is called coupled inquiry. For example, the teacher could begin with the guided inquiry phase, followed by an open inquiry phase. If the teacher understands the different levels of inquiry, then they can vary the learning experiences according to the needs of their students.
Yeah, it's quite, I mean, it's a great video, that, and it's on YouTube, so if you want to find that, I might have to look at the URL and pass it on to Monica and Kaiser. But like I say, do take it back to schools and use it if you think that would be helpful for others, because it's a really good thing. Okay, let's have a look now at a couple of those approaches that were spoken about in action. This is a film. It involves Julia Roberts there, you can probably see. Okay, very well-known educator that she is. And she is about to teach a class for the first time. And this particular class, she's going to teach in the direct teaching method. Okay, let's see how she gets on. And please have a think about how much the kids are actually learning.
Smell fear.
Might need to put the volume up a little bit, because I know this is quite quiet. So, go up a bit.
Good morning. Thank you. This is History of Art 100. We'll be following Dr. Staunton's syllabus. Any questions so far?
Your name?
Why don't you go first?
Connie Baker.
Catherine Watson, nice to meet you.
Dr. Watson, I presume.
Not yet. And you are?
Giselle Levy.
Giselle. If someone could get the...
Susan Delacourt.
Thank you, Susan Delacourt. From the beginning, man has always had the impulse to create art. Can anyone tell me what this is?
Wounded Bison, Altamira, Spain, about 15,000 BC. Joan Brandwin.
Very good, Joan. Despite the age of these paintings, they are technically very sophisticated.
Because of the shading and the thickness of the lines as it moves over the hump of the bison. Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly right. Next slide. This one you are probably less familiar with. It was discovered by archaeologists in
1879, Lascaux, France, dates back to 10,000 BC, singled out because of the flowing lines depicting the movement of the animal.
Impressive name?
Herd of horses.
I meant yours.
We call her Flicka.
Elizabeth Warren. They call me Betty.
Very good. Betty is also correct. Just because something is ancient doesn't mean that it is primitive. For example, next slide, please.
Mycerinus and his queen, 2470 BC. It's a funerary statue of the pharaoh and his queen, originally intended to preserve the pharaoh's soul.
Have any of you taken art history before?
No.
Let's go on slide.
Seated scribe, Egypt, 2400 BC.
Peasant couple plowing, 16th century BC, Egypt. Snake goddess, Minoan, 1600 BC.
Victoria's art fresco, Minoan, 1600 BC. Funeral mass, Mycenaean, 1200.
Someone please get... Thank you. By a show of hands only, how many of you have read the entire text?
And the suggested supplements.
Long way from Oakland State.
Well, you girls do prepare.
If you've nothing else for us, we could go to independent study.
Oh dear, poor Julia. She was at the level there of factual content only, okay? And they already knew it. They learnt nothing. Now, Julia has looked at her ATL program, and she knows all about resilience, so she's happy to go back for more. And she decides this time to take an inquiry-based approach and address some conceptual learning rather than just bare facts. So let's see if she actually is more successful.
What is that?
You tell me. Carcass by Soutine, 1925.
It's not on the syllabus.
No, it's not. Is it any good? Come on, ladies. There's no wrong answer. There's also no textbook telling you what to think. It's not that easy, is it?
All right, no, it's not good. In fact, I wouldn't even call it art. It's grotesque.
Is there a rule against art being grotesque?
I think there's something aggressive about it. And erotic.
To you, everything is erotic.
Everything is erotic.
Girls.
Aren't there standards?
Of course there are. Otherwise, a tacky velvet painting could be equated to a Rembrandt.
Hey, my Uncle Freddie has 2 tacky velvet paintings. He loves those clowns.
There are standards, technique, composition, color. Even subject. So if you're suggesting that rotted side of meat is art, much less good art, then what are we going to learn?
Just that. You have outlined our new syllabus, Betty. Thank you. What is art? What makes it good or bad, and who decides? Next slide, please. 25 years ago, someone thought this was brilliant.
I can see that.
Who? My mother. I painted it for her birthday. Next slide. This is my mom. Is it art?
It's a snapshot.
If I told you Ansel Adams had taken it, would that make a difference?
Art isn't art until someone says it is.
It's art.
The right people?
Who are they?
Betty Warren. We're so lucky we have one of them right here.
Could you go back to the Soutine, please? Just look at it again. Look beyond the paint. Let us try to open our minds to a new idea.
Okay, so that was Juliet having another go and going for the conceptual stuff. And you can see that she was rather more successful with that one, and the kids were actually using high-level critical thinking skills, okay? Is it art? Is it any good? Who decides if it's any good? All this analytical and evaluative thinking going on there. So much more learning for them. And we've kind of talked now about inquiry, and we've looked a little bit at what inquiry involves. Basically, it involves these things, and they're probably things which you're familiar with anyway, okay? They're not anything unfamiliar, I would suspect, to most people. People can find inquiry quite frightening, but actually it's quite familiar when you look at what's involved. Now, something that some people use, and that was shown on the video, is an inquiry cycle model. And this is an example of one. It's from, I think it was developed in Ontario, in Canada, and it's got the different stages of the inquiry cycle there, plus, I mean, you don't need to read the detail, and you can't, but those are actually very specific things that students can do within each phase of the inquiry cycle. So feel free to use something like that to do some planning, because this is actually a very good way when we're filling in the teaching and learning section of coming up with ideas, because we've got prompts there, and if we address the prompts that are appropriate for our unit, we can quite often come up with some good teaching ideas, okay? Inquiry in the classroom, you really saw a couple of these. Now these three scenes here show basically what we do in the classroom as teachers. We don't actually do anything else, really, other than this, or this, or this. Now, if we want kids to look into concepts and contexts and use high-level critical thinking skills, they have to be there, okay? We've got to do it so that they're there. So we've got to think about how we actually do that. And you may have noticed the repetition of one particular word, and that word is questions. They are so useful for getting into a unit and getting students using high-level critical thinking skills, okay? Questions, not like this, I think. Because questions too can be...
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression, passed the, anyone? The tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which, anyone raised or lowered? Raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone? Anyone? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics. Voodoo economics.
Okay, there are good ways of doing questions and not so good ways of doing questions. So let me introduce you instead to something you might try, actually, because if we've got a statement of inquiry, we've got in there to at least 2 concepts and a global context exploration. And a very good thing to try, like I say, in the classroom with students, is to get them into groups and give them one of those concepts and get them to come up with questions, to brainstorm questions. Yeah, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes to brainstorm questions, write them as quickly as possible onto post-it notes, and then post them somewhere in the classroom, and they can't repeat questions that are already there, okay? And they will come up with great questions. So, communication, okay? That's the word, that's what we're dealing with. Okay, students, write down as many questions as you can think of about communication. What can we find out about communication? What can we ask about communication? And they, in groups, will come up with really good questions, you know, and it might be stuff like that, okay, which have all come from students. So, what is effective communication? You can see that conceptual question there. In what ways can we communicate? Okay, pretty factual one. How far can we influence how others respond to our communication? What a good question, huh? In what ways can others be impacted by communication? What audiences do we communicate with? Who do we communicate with? Okay, and they'll come up with all kinds of questions, and they'll feed off each other, especially if they're going posting questions along the way and they see other people's. Okay, they come up with great questions, and it's great for us as teachers because they do the work for us, because we can then look at all those questions and say, oh, I've got that question bit on the unit planner as well. But hey, the kids have come up with the ones I actually want to use, okay? And they are, of course, inquiry questions, and having come up with them, they can then address them during the unit. All right, so try that with the kids. It works with something, key concept, related concept, whatever it is, and see how they get on with that. And how else can we go into a unit? That's actually what I do with the Shakespeare unit in effective communication, okay? Group work, just simple instructions there. 5 main ways in which people communicate. Choose 2 of these, and for each of your 2 choices, create a role play showing this method being used effectively, and a role play showing it being used ineffectively. They find that huge amounts of fun, I have to say, okay? So I'm giving a presentation. Yep, I'm going to give a presentation to primary. What's ineffective? Okay, primary, you're all listening, right? I'm okay, primary. What can I tell you about what can I tell you about Shakespeare today? I don't know really. Shakespeare was very, very interesting. Okay, they love doing that. They love doing that kind of role play as well. And of course, they're developing their understandings there of what makes communication effective or not. All right. So, those are some ideas about how to get into units through concepts and context. There are as well on the internet, if you're wondering about particular questions and you think, okay, we need different questions at different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Well, some very, very nice people somewhere out there in the world in time have come up with questions, or they've come up with tools where they actually give a series of question prompts which are going to lead to the kids thinking at particular levels. This one is synthesis, okay? And those question prompts should lead the kids to thinking in creative ways. And this is just one page, okay? This is one tool that's got this page for every single level. And there are several of these. So do look for Bloom's taxonomy question prompts, all right? And it'll give you question prompts. You don't even need to think them all up. We don't need to think them all up ourselves, okay? So, questions are really important for concepts. They're the way into teaching and learning, and they really activate those high-level critical thinking skills for the kids. They also mean that the kids can do all these. This again is Bloom's taxonomy. And something to note, these are all command terms, but kids have to do these actively, okay? So if any of your kids are assembling or assessing or estimating or contrasting or whatever, they can't do it with you at the front of the class. They have to do it themselves, okay? So, again, we've got to think about getting them up to Bloom's taxonomy, and that's going to happen here. So, give them the questions and let them come up with the questions, actually. Okay? We've got to think, it mentioned the teacher role there, it becomes much more complex. When we're doing inquiry-based learning, we do need to think about what we need to do in the classroom. And usually it's pretty hands-on because that student needs some direct help, but that student over there just needs a stimulus because they can develop their own inquiry, okay? And you can see how differentiation can come into this as well now. Once they're working like this, but like I say, it's a lot of work for us, and we can't just sit on a computer and do our own stuff, I'm afraid. We've got to go around the kids and give them whatever support they need. Do they need direction? Do they need encouragement? Do they need some feedback or whatever? Okay? So the role of the teacher becomes much more important. Quick slide, gone on there. Quick slide that just shows the difference. Direct instruction, acquisition of information, inquiry-based, using the information, okay? Much more limited if we're just at the front than if it's inquiry-based, all right? And remember three different levels of inquiry-based learning as well. And again, it's more work because we've got to really plan for this for our different student levels in our class. But this is differentiation, again, that we have to do. Okay? So, with that, I'm going to go on, actually. Just one thing, I think the cartoon makes this point. Inquiry-based learning will not just happen all on its own, all right? It can be very, very bad experience for the kids. Don't know why it's jumping on, I'm sorry. And this is a description from one researcher about what inquiry-based learning can be. A chaotic classroom where kids are doing things but not clear about what they were doing or what they can find out from it, okay? At its worst, inquiry-based learning, if it's not done properly, can result in miseducation. You cannot just leave the kids to it, all right? It takes a lot of planning and actually quite a bit more work, I think, than the direct method. So it's something we need to think about carefully and to work on bit by bit, all right? Like I say, it's not that, not leaving the kids to it. It's not failing to teach them basics either, okay? It's something which's got to be carefully planned so that kids can do things in life, like what the World Economic Forum thinks is the most important skill students are going to need in 2020, complex problem solving, all right? So if they're going to do that, they have to have that practice in developing high-level critical thinking skills. Forbes thought the same thing, ability to make decisions, solve problems. And if you look at the skills that employers want, problem solving comes up there a lot. High-level critical thinking skills come up a lot. So we need inquiry-based learning to get kids to do that. Okay? I think, yes, I've gone a little bit open, so I'm not going to show that video. I'm just going to go straight to the final thing. Leaving work on a Saturday when you've got a Sunday off, I am anticipating seeing that walking out the door very, very soon. Okay? So, that's me. A bit of a quick run through concepts, inquiry, global context, and so on and so on. I hope it's been of interest. I hope it's been useful. I hope it wasn't too difficult to sit through right at the end of a long day. I think, for my teachers, I think they're heroes coming along and putting so much into this. I'm sure your heads at your own schools must feel the same. And like I say, I hope it's been a useful day for everybody and you'll take something away. For me, I've kind of stood in front of a whole load of people that have given up their Saturday, and you have been so nice to me, it has been untrue. I have really, really appreciated it. Thank you so much, and I hope I meet many of you, if not all of you, again in Mumbai or along IB workshops or whatever it is at some time in the future. But in the meantime, all the very best with MYP concepts, context, and inquiry. Okay, thank you again.
Thank you, Gillian. In fact, when I met Gillian at a conference, I just told her we've SAIBSA and I really want you there. So she said, for how long? And I said, just one plenary session. And here we are with Gillian for the whole day. So thank you, Gillian. I think she needs another round of applause. Thank you so much. We really enjoyed it and we learned a lot. I'm sure now we are very polished with our concepts and content and global context and everything, right? So you need to incorporate all that, and most of you will be leading sessions now. Those who have already led will be just sitting back and relaxing and seeing the others facilitate, okay? So thank you so much. We'll just have a prize distribution now, so. Prize distribution, certificate distribution.
Thank you so much. That was the official announcement. Somebody's getting a prize from Miss Monica. Yeah. Everybody heard it. The audience is my witness. Thank you so much, Ms. Gillian, for the wonderful presentation and all the facilitators that we heard since morning. I've been walking along the corridors and getting really positive feedback. And since we want to go green, I'd plan to give you a physical form to fill in your feedback for us, because it's very important to know next time what to improve on. But now we've decided to go green. We're going to email a feedback form. Please take the time. I know you expect it of your students. Take the time to fill the feedback form. Tell us what we did well and what we didn't do well. Reflect on the experience and then let us know. Without wasting further time, because it's almost Sunday, I'm going to call upon the president of the SAIBSA, Mr. Kaiser Dopaishi, to give us a few closing remarks. He's never run out of wisdom to share. And he will also preside over the certificate distribution plus Miss Monica's prize.
Yeah, very quickly. I think it's just relevant that in our teaching and learning, values come into being, and appreciation is one aspect of it. So, first and foremost, we thank the school, the RBK, I think from all the organization, food, right? Food. And just the idea of coming together, right? This comes at just one price, which is the desire to collaborate and cooperate. I think for that, and you saw how everybody came into being, whether it was IT, whether it was resource, without much ado. So to Monica and her team, in particular also Vidya, this lady standing at the back here, please come up here. Please give them a nice round of applause, please. Right? I always say it takes a whole day, a whole months together to get this together, and then when on the final day it just gets over so quickly. And so, my God, I did all this for this, just finished. Right? Feedback necessary, because this feedback is about us as a group, right? And I think please do that. The facilitators, all of whom who spared their time and came here with the idea that you go back rejuvenating, you learn through this sharing, you understand that as I keep saying, it's more blessed to give than to receive. And to me, that is a philosophical underpinning as a teacher, right? As an educator. When you see the delight in your students' eyes of having got something, or you meet an ex-student who you have taught, and he says, hi, hello ma'am, hello sir, how are you, right? And so to that extent, the facilitators to have got the time put in particular, or in Jillian, who's taken a whole lot of role dealing with it, being ahead of the school, also workshop leader, she's also traveling with regards to MYP and DP, right? Evaluation team, and the association goes very, very long. From 2011, I remember doing the DP one at Podar International School. So for all that, we have already registered our appreciation, but this is from our heart to you to have come here, and also to all the other facilitators. Thank you. Thank you so much. Can we give them a big hand? Of course, there are many hands behind the team when this whole thing was organized. The cameraman here, the people who, the support staff who supported us. Perhaps as you're going back, smile at them, tell them thank you. Yeah, just bringing a cup of tea or coffee into your room in itself is an act of, saying that we care about you. Those little grace and little acts of appreciation, acts of kindness are valued. So to all the support staff around there, can we give them a big hand too? And finally, last but not the least, you all. Your desire to come together, I think. A desire to, collaborate. I saw while I was dealing with the session how facilitation went on. People just kept on putting in, and we just passed the baton down, and everybody picked it up, and very happily from across schools, right? The spirit of cross-pollination can be seen, not just in the act of shifting from one school to the other, but the act of actually sharing what you have learned, right? So to all of you, because this was not possible if you all were not there. All of you shared things, and I think kudos to you all. So a big applause to you guys. I think you need also, thank you, sir. Right, we had some other people come in and give their support, whether it was readable English, whether it was PASCO with their thing, whether it was with reference to Calido coming in and being a part of that little resource persons. I think all of them went on to be a catalyst in our understanding of the program, right? So that much from me. And Duke, thank you very much for your comparing. I think with a straight face, he said some very light things. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Kaiser. Now, we're going straight into the certificate distribution, and for that session, I will smile on orders of the President of SAIBSA. Now, the first in line for the certificate is Miss Gillian Ashworth, and Mr. Kaiser is going to give her a certificate for conducting very wonderful sessions and also for facilitating the language and literature session. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to request Ms. Gillian to award certificates to the other facilitators. Ms. Zoha Khan, Language Acquisition, Spanish and French. Miss Vidya Upadhyay and Miss Savita Agarwal, Language Acquisition, Hindi. Miss Monica Sarang, Mr. Prashant Kamble, Mr. Dipendra Mathur, and Dr. Ashok Modi, in other words, RBK Mathematics Department. For science, Miss Ashika Tenzin, Miss Sima Niaz, and Miss Jaswinda Randhawa. Individuals and societies. Mr. Kaiser Dopaishi. Design, Ms. Shreya Mudalia and Mr. Satnam Singh. Thank you so much, design team. And for physical and health education, Mr. Ashutosh Potnes. Visual arts, performance and music, Mr. Rajesh Kargutkar, Ms. Kavita Sukhani, and Ms. Ruma Day. For inclusion, Ms. Sandra Francis, and library, Ms. Kuntal Bandare. Now for the school certificates, in order to move faster because we are so close to Sunday, we're going to require one representative from each school to collect the entire set of certificates for participants from each school. For Choitram International School, you will get your certificate from Mr. Kaiser. École Mondiale World School, you will get your certificates from Miss Monica. And Fountainhead School, you'll get your certificates from Miss Gillian. Representatives of the schools, please. Choitram, École Mondiale, and Fountainhead. Edubridge School, you'll get your certificates from Mr. Kaiser. And Garodia School, you'll get your certificate from Miss Monica. Hiranandani, you'll get your certificate from Miss Gillian. Jamnabai Narsi International School, your certificate from Mr. Kaiser. Kohinoor American School from Miss Monica Sarang. And Mount Litera School, you get the certificate from Miss Monica. Navrachana International School, NES International School, and Next School. You'll get your certificates from Mr. Kaiser, Miss Gillian, and Miss Monica, respectively. Oak Ridge International, Oberoi, and RBKIA, get your certificates from Mr. Kaiser, Miss Monica, and Miss Gillian, respectively. Oberoi School, Symbiosis International School, Vishwa Shanti Gurukul, and Wokat Global School.
Okay, thank you so much, all of you. Just one school left, which is the RBK International School, RBK International Academy. So I will request Ms. Vidya to come and take the certificates, please.
If there are any errors in the name, etc., check, and then you can come back after this in case there is. Okay? Just to tell you very quickly, you had about 300 people in this session, and there were 18 schools which came here. So, great. Thank you very much. And now go safely home and enjoy a relaxed Sunday.
Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you. Enjoy your Sunday.